So, folks, we have to talk about who on the political horizon should we get excited about next? What progressive is pushing a leftist message that is embracing of the working class? And one name that, I just have followed over the last couple years has been State Representative Ruwa Romman, who is from Georgia, has announced that she is running for governor of Georgia. And she gained some degree of notoriety and fame, not notoriety, fame, last year. She was one of the people who was going to speak up on behalf of Palestinians at the Democratic National Convention and was refused a spot to speak by the Kamala Harris campaign. And she has been hitting the pavement, hitting the dirt, and traveling all across the state of Georgia, building up connections and communities across the land. And she gave one of her first interviews a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to take a look at it with all y'all because she's been doing the groundwork necessary to try and push a statewide campaign in Georgia. Georgia recently, in the blue tsunami event that took place, had two Democrats unseat two Republican incumbents in statewide elections on an off election year. So her long shot run seems to be getting a little bit closer to reality. And I think, hey, you know what? I think she's someone to keep in mind. And if you are so positioned and inclined, volunteer for it. So let's take a look here. Here's just an example of one of her recent campaign stops. That's not even... There we go. There we go. We did it. We did it, everyone. We have visual confirmation. Yeah, she's absolutely lovely. And you can see her here smiling in the middle. And let's take a look at her recent interview with 11 Alive. She's just delightful.
State Representative Ruwa Romman joining us on the Georgia Vote and 11 Alive. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the obvious. You've made a lot of news in the last couple of weeks. You're running for governor now.
Yes, I am.
Why do you want to be Georgia's next governor?
I'm running to build a movement. The reality is that for 20 years, Republicans have controlled our state, and in that time, hospitals have closed. Our minimum wage has stayed at $5.15 an hour, and even our education ranking has been getting lower. And the reality is the most immediate way we can change that is to change who's in power. And so I'm running to raise the minimum wage, take homes back from corporations, reopen hospitals, invest in small businesses, and feed hungry kids. And for me, that is sort of the way that you should be governing.
You laid out a lot of policy issues there, and I want to dig into them in a moment, but I want to start with...
hell yeah, sensible policy positions? Yeah. Reopen hospitals is, I gotta say, usually a pretty compelling argument for a politician, because it turns out people need those.
Broader question, because you rightly pointed out that it's been roughly 2 decades since Democrats have controlled the governor's mansion in Georgia. How do you flip it now?
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, no, the state minimum wage in Georgia is still $5.15 per hour. It's insane. My God.
That's why I said I'm running to...
The federal minimum, I think, is $7.50, but Georgia has a lower state minimum.
Build a movement, right? I firmly believe that the best way to reach voters and to change who's in power is one door, one conversation, and one person at a time. It was from the first campaign I ever volunteered.
How can it be below the federal wage? Because federal and state law are two different things?
Volunteered for was Michelle and Jason Carter campaign in 2014. And I remember very clearly after that first door knock getting really excited and saying, what if we actually talked to voters directly? What if we had those conversations with them and told them what we're fighting for and not just...
Well, yeah, how it's practiced in the state Catabingo Rising is that you have to follow both the federal and the state laws, right? So on a state level, it's not a state crime to pay someone $5.15 per hour, but it is still a federal crime. So, you guys are like, wouldn't Georgia have to follow the federal minimum wage? yeah, businesses in in Georgia have to follow the federal law as well as the state law. So if the federal law is $7.50, then they have to pay $7.50 to avoid federal charges.
Be timid about maybe
I thought it was whatever is higher. It is whatever is higher on a practical level, but the federal law and the state law, like when the feds introduce a new law, like that doesn't mean state level legislatures pass the same law. So sometimes there are cases where federal law overrules state law, and some cases where state law overrules federal law, or, you know, because like a state can set a higher minimum wage than the federal law, too, in which case a business would be charged on state charges if they paid below that.
A little bit better, but have aspirations that we're working towards.
I am sure that there are going to be some Democratic voters who hear that, they're going to be nodding their heads along. I suspect there may be some as well who were...
I'm sure some people want to reopen hospitals, but what do you have to say to those who want people to die en route to their hospitals, like the poor are supposed to?
Remember similar messaging coming out of the two gubernatorial campaigns of Stacey Abrams that made a lot of noise, got close, but eventually both failed. And they might hear you say this as well and have a little bit of skepticism. What do you say to that Democratic primary voter?
Yeah, so first and foremost, there will be no incumbent this time around, and the closest we got was in 2018, but at the time, our population was still somewhat different. Today, our population is even younger. We have more folks who are looking for a different direction, and to be quite frank, a lot more people have been left behind. We've spent so much time focused, at least down at the Capitol, Republicans have spent so much time focused on corporations and special interests, and a lot more Georgians are noticing.
Let's talk about Paul.
Also, like, I'm just something I'm noticing. She's really good at this. Like, it's clear she's practiced the talking points, but she's not using any filler words. Like, she's able to present this in a very straightforward, easy to understand way. Like, I talk all the time for my job, and I struggle with filler words quite a bit. She's doing it no problem, like just completely avoiding them.
See, you laid out a couple of things that are important to you, but we always ask this question, so I want to put it to you directly. What is the number one challenge?
Yeah, after that last election, folks, a few days ago, Blorja's back on the menu.
Challenge facing Georgians right now, in your view?
Right now, it is the challenge of affordability. Everything is getting more expensive, and it's getting more expensive at the same time. Think about utility bills. They've skyrocketed. Think about the fact that even though everything is getting more expensive like food, wages have stayed the same, and we haven't really done much about it. Car insurance. We kept saying we needed tort reform to lower insurance rates. Once again, insurance rates are going back up. And so no matter sort of what profession you have, you're a small business owner, even what financial status you're in, everyone is experiencing some financial discomfort right now or straight up financial difficulty.
Affordability has...
Like, now is a perfect time to start leveraging this because the employment numbers that have been coming out from independent watchdogs are pretty grim, to say the least. Like, you have a few of these watchdogs are reporting that around 1 million people have been laid off, which, to give you guys perspective, that's more than in 2008. So that if any of the current economic indicators are at all indicative, running on affordability is the savvy play right now.
And you'll probably be unsurprised to hear this, affordability has been probably the most frequently cited issue of the candidates when we ask that question
Correct.
to them. You cite it as well. How do you fix the affordability problem?
Yeah, I think we have to get our priorities in order. We cannot keep focusing on corporations. And to give you an example, this legislative session, we had multiple special interest bills fly through the legislature, but we haven't even once discussed the minimum wage. And at least in the past 12 years, my colleague, State Representative Dewey McClain, has presented a minimum wage bill every session that he was there. And it never even got a conversation, let alone a vote. And so, but when it came to, for example, protecting a corporation, a pesticide corporation specifically, that could poison people from liability, it sailed through within one session. And so for me, it's how do we flip that dynamic on its head and actually center Georgians instead of corporations and special interests?
Let's talk about paying for this stuff, because I can hear the voices in my head and the voices
Sure.
of viewers who are going to be hearing this and saying, well, hey, if you want to expand healthcare funding, if you want to raise the minimum
She's smiling like somebody who's rehearsed this particular interaction 10,000 times.
wage, that could put a pinch on some Georgia businesses, some Georgia institutions. How do you pay for all this?
No, thank you. I love that question because I am a policy sort of wonk, as they say. In the case of, for example, the minimum wage, right? We would look at it in a way that, hey, corporations are already paying these wages to other people outside of Georgia. Georgians deserve a higher wage. And so what if, when it comes to implementing that minimum wage, we actually put small businesses on a longer time span so they have more time to adjust? It's actually less disruptive to them. And the focus is on those bigger corporations because they are competing and they're getting a lot of tax incentives from us anyway.
So effectively staggering when the rollout
Correct.
of this rising minimum wage would
Exactly.
be. So big corporations have to comply sooner. Smaller businesses have longer timeline to get ready for it.
Correct, because right now if you look at our tax code, it is very amenable to large corporations, but not so much small businesses. Large corporations are the ones that get the bulk of it. To the question on, for example, healthcare access and healthcare expansion, we're losing way more than we're gaining by not doing this. A lot of small businesses, if we're going to be talking about them, are shuttering because they cannot afford to give their employees health insurance. We've actually lost a massive chunk of the film industry, specifically because of the cost of healthcare in a state like Georgia. And to be clear, we've already paid these tax dollars. These are actually tax dollars sitting there that we don't have any access to because we refuse to expand Medicaid, which is a bill that could be less than a page long.
This is an excellent point to make, especially as the Trump administration is trying to strip healthcare from a lot of folks who live in Georgia. The current administration is right now in court arguing that they should be able to starve children. Again, a lot of those children live in Georgia.
Talking about being a policy wonk, in your view, that's how you describe yourself and your view in state legislative topics. Georgia has a sizable surplus right now.
Correct.
What do you propose be done with those billions of dollars in surplus?
My concern right now is because of the federal tax cuts, we are going to be experiencing a lot of disruptions. So if I would be forced to use that surplus, it would actually be to keep us steady as we weather that storm. But in addition, that is already generating interest. I mean, there is literally generating constantly interest. What if we took some of that interest, which is constantly recreated money, and built some programs that could be micro-targeted to the communities that need it most? So that way we're not spending money we don't have or money that we might need on a rainy day, but it's actually a program that could be a long-lasting program for Georgians that need it the most.
Let's talk about some of your background as a politician and as an activist and as somebody who's been involved, even though you've been in the State House for 2 terms so far, you've been involved in politics for a long time now. You mentioned that Georgia, earlier in our conversation, has gotten younger. There's been a focus on younger candidates around the country. You are one of them. You're not the only one. You probably know where I'm going with this. You've been a vocal supporter of the New York City mayoral candidate, Ruwa Mamdani. Do you see him as an example, as somebody who other Georgia younger candidates should emulate?
There's been a running joke that we're going to have one of those countdowns his days since Zoran's been mentioned related to this campaign, since do your own permanent marker. You know, but I understand why people are making that comparison. And to be clear, what makes Zoran's campaign so appealing to a lot of us is that he used and leveraged sort of this new media environment, not just to gain notoriety or build a brand. What he did is he leveraged it to teach and educate the population about the process of voting, of campaigning, but then pulled in a sizable number of volunteers. I think they're at almost 90,000 volunteers. And what I tell people is if we can recruit 5,000 volunteers by the end of the primary, 15,000 by the end of the general, we're completely changing the dynamic of elections in a state like Georgia. And so even though his policies were targeted to New York, what I want people to understand is that it's actually about the actual steps of electioneering, of how to run a campaign that should make that really compelling and should be the lessons people take of how do we go to voters and make them a partner in this process, because the reality is when we end up, if we end up governing, we would need them with us in that process. And to do that, you have to give them a policy they can believe in and understand and show them how to be able to make a difference.
I'm glad you take that tack, because I read your AJC op-ed kind of on this topic as well, and it was pretty heavily strategy focused, like you just said. I mean, it seems like you really admire the way that his campaign has been run from a strategic.
Yeah, some breaking news here, folks. It appears that specifically Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson has issued a temporary halting order impeding the rollout of SNAP benefits. Specifically, she ruled that until the appeal is officially ruled on, the Trump administration will be able to withhold SNAP benefits. And like, I gotta be honest, I'm a bit shocked. Like, I'm a bit flabbergasted. I don't know exactly who decides on the Supreme Court who writes what. I don't know why she would willingly put that order out into the world. I don't get it. Yeah, no, the reporting from the Hill is saying that it's Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson who halted the order requiring a full distribution of SNAP benefits. Some states will have already paid out. I've heard Oregon has, for one. Each justice is assigned an area. This involves Rhode Island, which is her area. Yeah, no, it's signed by Ketanji Brown Jackson. I don't know. She oversees Rhode Island in that area of the country. I mean, that's great, but I don't understand the reasoning, really. I'm looking at the ruling right now, and earlier today, the applicants asked the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit to stay the district court's orders pending appeal and to issue an administrative stay to facilitate its consideration of that stay motion at 6:08 p.m. The First Circuit denied the applicants' request for an administrative stay, but stated that it intends to issue a decision on the stay pending appeal motion as quickly as possible. The applicants filed an application in this court this evening requesting a stay of the two district court orders pending the disposition of the government's appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, and if the Court of Appeals affirms those orders, pending the timely filing and disposition of a petition for a writ of certiorari in this court. I'm really bad at reading legalese. Application at 1, the applicants assert that without intervention from this court, they will have to transfer an estimated $4 billion by tonight to fund SNAP benefits through November. Given the First Circuit's representations, an administrative stay is required to facilitate the First Circuit's expeditious resolution of the pending stay motion. It is ordered. This argument makes fuck all sense to me. First Circuit denied the administrative stay, and she issued the stay given the First Circuit's representation. Yeah, this is exactly what's confusing me, Paladin. And it's confusing me as well because, again, it's Ketanji Brown Jackson. She's one of the left-leaning judges. In fact, I would describe her as the most left-leaning Supreme Court justice. So I'm I'm baffled. If an administrative stay is required to facilitate the First Circuit's expeditious resolution, the First Circuit would have given one. Exactly. So I guess I hope most states have already distributed the funds, because was she threatened? I don't think so. I have no reason to think that. But like, I gotta be honest. It's bizarre. Her order will remain in place until 48 hours after the appeals court rules, giving the administration time to return to the Supreme Court if the appeals court refuses to step in. It's so fucking bullshit. By the time the administration reached the Supreme Court, the USDA had already sent a letter to regional SNAP directors indicating it was working to comply and process the payments. Yeah, I mean, some states have already sent out the payments. So, folks, I, again, just want to reiterate, if you have your SNAP interrupted, encourage you to post in the Discord and in the Discord mutual aid thread, and we'll all have to make sure we're checking in, taking a look at who's posting, and help anyone out who's struggling given the cutting off of SNAP. So it's just really bizarre. Don't know what to make of it yet. I have to wait for more info. The sadists online are celebrating this decision? Well, yeah, of course, because they love the starvation of children.
Strategic perspective, but I want to tease this out. If
Robert Hubble, who I trust, said this. He wants an order from the First Circuit upholding the trial court. That would give the liberal minority a foothold to argue the Supreme Court should do as well. A strategic stay to increase chance of restarting SNAP benefits. So maybe it's like a 4D chess move to try and like shore up SNAP indefinitely, not just in this immediate crisis. Oh, God. Well, Ruwa Romman is positioned to do very well given this rocky, fucking chaotic administration. Dropped a SCOTUS blog link in the topic suggestions. I mean, this goes over a lot of the arguments that John Sauer makes on behalf of the DOJ, but it does not go into Jackson's reasoning, which is what I'm more interested in here. She wants an order? Yeah. Elon Musk gets voted by his board to receive potentially $1 trillion, and the Trump administration is going to court. And I must reiterate, the Trump administration is going to court to argue that it should be able to starve children in this country. To argue that they should be able to starve 23 million children. That is what this monstrosity of a government is spending our taxpayer dollars doing. Paying lawyers and politicians to argue that they should starve children here in this country. Disgusting. Any way you cut it.
If you'll permit me,
please.
Your support for Mamdani, is it solely strategic, or do you also agree with him on a lot of policy issues?
Yeah, I think his focus on affordability is one we should be talking about a lot more. Because at the end of the day, the thing about politics, especially with so much money...
Like, I don't know, people who are real, like Ruwa, now's the perfect time to get involved in politics, because everything is so horseshit right now. For so many people, being an honest advocate, organizing folks on the ground who are just sick and fed up of being sick and fed up is a really effective strat.
In politics is inevitably campaigns end up talking about things that an average voter goes, I don't really know why we're talking about that. That has nothing to do with my day-to-day life. And his laser focus on, hey, I talked to my neighbors, I talked to people on the street, I actually went out into the community and asked them, what's top of mind for you? That's actually how we ran our first campaign. I remember before we fully got into it, when we would go knock doors, the first question was, what's top of mind for you today? You know, I would introduce myself, say I'm running for office, and then I would...
Sake Tanuki.
We don't want to starve children in this country. We want to starve children in all countries, the GOP.
Yeah, and we'll give all of the savings to our billionaire donors. A brilliant plan. $1 trillion for each of us. How could no one have thought of it before? We're making the world a more efficient place. Harumph, harumph, harumph. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. Very much appreciated. And, yo, Runjack, DSA letter campaign writing got a $4 raise to all city workers voted on 13-1 in our common council. Now it's on the mayor's desk. Hell yeah! Get that cold hard cash for those working hands. Let's go! That's what I'm talking about. You guys can do so much cool shit in your community when you start getting involved.
Ask them that question. And that's what he did. He physically went out and talked to people, and then that's how he built his platform. And similarly here, we physically have been going out and talking to people for a very long time, and that's how we built that campaign. And so for us, it's about, what if we did this differently? Instead of a top-down approach, what if we did it from a all-of-us-up approach?
Let's talk about, you mentioned that, reaching out and you know, having the two-way conversation. You're obviously a Democrat. The Democratic Party is a big tent party, and there are lots of different...
Worth mentioning, if you'd like a truly leftist education, Haymarket Books has every ebook they carry for $2. This is a good way to learn some social justice for the cost of a pizza.
It's true. Haymarket, I like Haymarket Books a lot. Highly recommend as well. And Paladin, thank you for the $5 dono. Very much appreciated. Let's go! Get some reading done on theory, while also organizing in your community.
Groups and factions and coalitions within the Democratic Party. There are progressives, liberals, centrists, pragmatists, which is a 3-syllable word that I should be able to pronounce. But there are a lot of people under this Democratic Party tent. Progressives, liberals, Democratic socialists, centrists.
Yeah.
With what time? It's a very good point. As somebody who is busy literally 100% of the time. Yeah.
How do you define yourself?
You know, I am letting voters define me. I think for me, at the end of the day, I would define myself as someone who is laser focused on the economic issues that matter most to Georgians. And so some people have called me a populist, some people have called me a progressive. And I think that's sort of a lane that we sort of fit in between. But the reality is that politics is changing. Those labels on left versus right aren't fully covering the dynamics of politics anymore. I really, really think it's become a more bottom versus top, top versus bottom kind of approach. And we are seeing it in our bills, in our day-to-day life, and even in the legislature. It's become very disconnected.
And there has been, talking about this big tent party, there have been questions about the path forward for the Democratic Party, which is not new. When a major party loses a presidential election, there's always some soul searching, right?
Yep.
But even before the 2024 election, there was some tension inside the Democratic Party. And you played a little bit of a role in a moment of that. You'll remember back in 2024, you were possibly going to have a speaking slot at the DNC.
Yeah.
You ended up not having that speaking slot. And I want to read you something you wrote in an op-ed in the Rolling Stone. You wrote that the decision to not allow you to speak there revealed what you called the structural racism inside the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Sure, thank you for that question. So the way that went about is it was a kind of a very, very weird situation where I wasn't even supposed to be at the convention. I was there for a very different panel and got really pulled into this and sucked into this. But I remember very clearly at the time thinking that if we want to be a big tent party, that stage needed to reflect that. We had Republicans on that stage. I mean, we had
one from
CBP,
Georgia.
One from Georgia.
Lieutenant
We
Governor
had,
Jeff Duncan.
Correct. We had CBP agents on that stage. And so when you say, we're not going to give 2 minutes, and to be clear, it wasn't about me in particular. I just ended up being sort of the final coalescing name that everyone came around. But it was about any Palestinian, any person with my identity on that stage really did reflect a big problem, which is that if we're going to call ourselves a big tent party, there was someone, like a person on that stage glaringly missing at a time when this was a big issue for a lot of folks in the base. And so, but this is actually something that I need folks to understand, and we're starting to see some of that bubble up, is that if we really want to be a big tent party, we have to reflect that. And not just in identity or face, but also in the institutions that we are building. Are those voices at the table? Are they being represented? Or are we just talking about them without them, which is something I'm very, very attuned to.
And I should just make a footnote here.
The thing I like about her, and the thing I think that she may have the juice for here, is that she's very plain spoken. Like, this is a very matter-of-fact rundown of a lot of the issues that Georgians are facing on a day-to-day basis. And I think people in Georgia are going to appreciate that. I think that this is a great way to convey a sense of earnestness that is a departure from a lot of flowery words and a lot of highfalutin language, but not a lot of policy fact. And I think folks, especially right now, they want to hear what the policies are, considering Donald Trump has none.
The reason we say Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, you said there was a Republican there. He was still a Republican at the time.
Correct.
He's now a Democrat.
I think maybe an independent, I don't know.
He wasn't a Democrat officially yet.
Yeah.
He is now one of your opponents in this Democratic primary. And I want to ask you about that in a moment.
Sure.
But you had a lot to say in that Rolling Stone piece. You also wrote that in that Rolling Stone piece, you said that you agonized over the decision whether to endorse Kamala Harris for president or not.
Yeah.
That was a pretty easy decision for many Democrats, but not you. Why?
Yeah, so me being Palestinian and the ongoing genocide in Gaza meant that I was representing a constituency and a population that didn't have a voice. But the reality was that no matter what had happened at the DNC, what had sort of gone down related to me personally, right? Because it is going to be one of those.
Okay, wait. I do trust Chris Geidner here. DOJ went to SCOTUS before we got the First Circuit's administrative stay denial. We know this because DOJ just filed a letter at SCOTUS about the admin stay denial. So DOJ went to SCOTUS because the First Circuit did not meet its less than 7-hour deadline for a ruling. What? Okay, so basically DOJ jumped the gun, and so my understanding of this, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, anybody, is that DOJ jumped the gun and went to SCOTUS before the First Circuit could even officially make its full ruling. And thus, that's why you have Ketanji Brown Jackson issuing the administrative stay in order to basically reaffirm that the DOJ has to go through the First Circuit. Is that correct? Either way, that's insane. More or less, yeah? Okay. I hate this administration so much.
Well, they rejected you off the stage and you still endorsed them anyway? That doesn't make any sense. And when it came to that agonizing moment, one, it was...
Basically, they did a ask mom and ask dad trick where they asked both First Circuit and SCOTUS for the same stay. That should really be something where they get disbarred, right? Like, that seems like so underhanded at such a high level of culpability and seriousness that, like, you shouldn't be able to practice law anymore if you do some dirty tricks like that.
Am I even the right person to do this? I'm a state rep from Georgia. I'm not even a member of Congress or any kind of national figure. And two,
No, not actually bad enough to be disbarred. Gee, fuck. These guys suck.
Would the community see that as a betrayal? Because for a lot of people, a lot of them aren't from Georgia. Those who are watching this don't know what it's like to be in a swing state. And so the question then became, is it my role? Why am I even in this, right? Why am I as a state representative even in this? And what would that mean for the community? But the reality was that...
Well, Nyanret, I don't think Donald Trump and his administration are trying to starve the poors to death. You know, the poors. I think what they're doing is trying to break down democratic resistance so that they don't have to back down on healthcare. So it's not that they're trying to kill all of the poors via SNAP refusal of payments. They're trying to kill a larger group of people by denying them healthcare. You know, so they're using the starvation as a political pawn in order so that they can give their rich donors the money that they're going to be saving by cutting Medicaid. Yeah, it's like even more bullshit than you're articulating. And like right now, directly attributable to Elon Musk and Doge, there are already like something around an order of like 400,000 children have died as a result of USAID being cut off and defunded. It's crazy. You have no idea how many are on SNAP? Yeah, it's over 40 million people. It's I believe the exact number is 43 million people, and 23 million of them are children.
Trump was, as we are seeing today, a deeply, deeply dangerous figure. And on top of that this was sort of a campaign that had, 107 days to
I guess I'm just saying people suffering isn't a side effect of their greed, it's a bonus feature. Yeah, it's a bonus feature that they directly do want to have happen. Yeah.
Why could Minneapolis side with Trump and say, no photos, please?
Well, I mean, they sided with not exactly a Trump candidate, but Jacob Fry, who's infuriating. And I'm mad that the one place where we couldn't get a win over an incumbent Dem with a more progressive candidate, it seems to be Minneapolis. So I'm a little salty about that one. Fry does nothing. Fry actively wants to blight the area of town where like the George Floyd protests happened. Like he actively wants to destroy this part of the city. Like in some kind of twisted vengeance. It's weird and gross, and I was really hoping that like Fateh would get in and be able to turn some things around. But like deliberately absentee landlords, specifically over like businesses, have been using tax loopholes while not filling empty business space. You've got, which in turn leads to an uptick in crime in the area. On top of that, like a lot of people live there, and like construction projects have languished. There's been a lot of knock-on issues, we'll say. And it's very frustrating.
I blame St. Paul. Twin Cities no more.
We must have a citywide divorce. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 7 tier 1 subs. Very much appreciated. And that brings us actually to 10% of our goal. Let's fucking go. And also, let's finish this interview with this fascinating new political star. I want you all to pay attention to this woman. I think she could be a big deal.
Be able to get to the finish line. And when we have a state where we won by 11,700.
Actually, one last thought before we go. I do think Fate's campaign achieved a large enough percentage of the vote in order to make Fry, out of political necessity, tack further to the left. At least that's my hope. But we'll see.
180 votes. It was a moment that I had to do.
Did you feel in some ways torn between practical politics and your principles?
No, it was actually specifically.
Don't you dare cut ties with St. Paul. They have better domes than you could dream of, Minneapolis.
Around, is this my role to play? Why am I even in this, right? And who am I to speak on behalf of an entire community? I think a lot of times when you are the first and you're elected as a first, people kind of immediately put the microphone in your face when something happens related to that community. And I'm always very, very cautious of using that platform to speak on just my opinions. For me, it's, am I being reflective of that community? And so anytime I spoke, for example, with a party leader, I was always clear to say, I understand strategically why this is important, but the rest of my community isn't there yet. Here's what we need to do to win them over, because it was important for me that I wasn't just erasing everybody's voices for sort of political strategy in this moment.
I want to drive us back to some Georgia-specific conversation here.
This camera angle is really disconcerting and ominous.
In the remaining minutes we have left, I appreciate you making the time. I do want to spend one last moment on international policy.
Sure.
Just because I would be remiss, as you and I both know, you use the phrase genocide to describe how you view what is occurring in Palestine right now.
Yep.
You and I both know that there are people who agree with that. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene at one point used that word and made a lot of noise about it in describing the situation. But there are others who take great issue with that descriptor. What do you say to somebody who would take issue with describing the situation as a genocide?
I mean, to be clear, Congressman Hank Johnson did too. And I think for a lot of people who have been watching this issue, seeing it unfold, it's not even about my opinion or my feelings. We have organizations, including Israeli organizations like B'Tselem, Amnesty International.
True.
As early as January 2024, the ICJ had demanded that Israel, for example, allow food in to prevent a genocide. And so it's actually not about my opinion or my feelings. It's just the reality on the ground. And I have cousins there, right? A lot of us have family there. And it's not as if we're just bringing this out of thin air to say it. I deeply believe in calling things for what it is.
I just want to be super clear, who do you blame for that then?
The entity committing the genocide. I mean, at the end of the day,
which is?
In this case, it's Israel, right? Their military did not have to wholesale bomb a small strip of land, right? There are ways to engage in warfare. And this is actually something, if you go back to 2023, one of my Republican colleagues who served in the military pointed this out. He said, I served in the military. This is not how you engage in warfare. This is not how it's supposed to go. And so, again, this is not just my opinion. This is based on the expertise of others who know way more about international human rights law and military warfare than I do, and who have the expertise to back it up.
Let's talk about Georgia. Let's talk about the Democratic primary field.
Yeah.
I was on air earlier this morning and an anchor asked me, it seems like it keeps evolving, and I said it feels like almost every week there's a new candidate jumping into this. And I don't think I'm betraying any kind of journalistic independence and saying that's great for voters because they're going to have a lot of choices. As a candidate, I'm sure you keep an eye on the field as well. It's a big field of Democratic contenders. How do you stand out from the pack?
I mean, at the end of the day, the way that we are building this campaign is very different. We've been focused already on mobilizing volunteers, and we haven't even done our big volunteer push yet, and have volunteers from 40 counties signed up, hundreds of them, to be clear. We're going to be focused on, like I said, we were one of the first to put lines in the sand of these are the goals we want to achieve. Does this mean we're going to get every single thing if we're governing? No, but I firmly believe in setting those goals in the sand. Obviously, I am younger, but in addition to that, there are way too many people that have been in office for way too long and have become really disconnected. And so what if we brought a different perspective to the race and mobilized voters who for a long time didn't feel like their voice mattered?
Seems like a good idea. Maybe we should vote for this person and elect her.
Politics, I think Democratic politics in particular, are in some ways at an inflection point, or perhaps an inflection point. There are candidates like yourself who are floating a new theory in some ways of a candidacy. I've also heard from some people say right now in Georgia what Democrats need is a more traditional, moderate, centrist candidate.
Boo.
To people who raise that, what would you say to them in response?
There's that famous phrase that's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And in this situation, I see it as no different. Our voters need to have something to just vote for, not just vote against. And I think oftentimes we think that if we just put in the most middle of the road candidate, which by the way, I don't know what middle of the road means. When you talk to voters, every voter considers themselves a moderate until you talk to them about an issue they're really passionate about. And the coalition we're trying to build, the things we are really passionate about, are things that impact the most number of Georgians. And so when they say, let's just lean into another traditional candidate, let's just go to someone who we think can pull from here, the numbers aren't bearing that out. What ends up happening is for every sort of one of those elusive voters that we might win, we're actually losing 3 of our own to the couch. Not even to the opposition, but to the couch. And it breeds this, I tell people all the time, our greatest opposition isn't necessarily other candidates or Republicans, it's cynicism. Too many people have felt like nothing's going to change. But I mean, how amazing would it be if we did make that change happen?
You talk about the apathy that you...
Like, she's right, though. Like, the biggest hurdle is fighting off that apathy. It is getting people to care, and to care enough that they do something that they wouldn't normally do. That is the biggest hurdle in organizing. And she's 100% right. Like, people don't get off the couch just because, like generally, they don't get off the couch because of fear. They get out, like, if anything, they get on the couch because of fear. Like, they want to, like, cuddle up and be cozy or make themselves small out of fear. But what gets people off the couch is the hope and belief in something better. And so she's 100% correct. And she actually gets it. She understands the assignment.
You see in...
Reactionaries get off the couch because of fear. I think trying to spread fear motivates people in elections far less than actual belief in change.
And some frustration, I think, is what you're alluding to in your view of some voters. Do you think that is part of the reason that Democrats were not successful in 2024 in the presidential race?
Absolutely. We actually saw this, that once again, one of the largest groups of people that didn't vote were that sort of swayed this election were non-voters.
People who stayed home.
Correct. People who stayed home.
Yeah, fear motivates people to change, like, their perceptions of candidates, for sure. It's why you see a lot of negative attack ads. But fear also, I mean, voting against, a campaign about, like, oh, vote for me, I'm not the big scary candidate. That's not an effective way to run a campaign. It just demotivates people.
And I think oftentimes we get so into the partisan politics that we forget there's actually another option for voters, which is not voting at all. And as somebody who has been voting since she could, it's very frustrating to me, obviously, but also I understand why. When I'm in that Capitol and I see what moves in terms of legislation and what doesn't, when I see the way that we talk to voters and about voters, I always think to myself, of course they would feel this way. So what if we change that? What if we actually centered our voters and our constituents above all else and change the dynamic of not just conversation, but also policy priorities, and maybe...
Mamdani will turn non-voters into non-voters.
The most delicious kind of voter. I really want some naan bread now. Also, Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. Very much appreciated. Thank you for supporting the stream.
Give them a reason to come out, because again, people are struggling. There are people working 2, 3, 4 jobs, and on top of that, we're asking them take time off to work or to vote, and not only that, maybe even help out on a political campaign. That's a really tall ask for a lot of people, and you better make it worth it if you're running for office.
Let's end here. We've covered a lot of ground. You've been involved in politics for a long time, relatively speaking. But you are still a younger member of the Democratic Party. You're a fairly new legislator in Georgia, 2 terms in the state house. To a voter who maybe has not heard of you, has never met you yet, your elevator pitch to them would be what?
So I am somebody who brings a lot of expertise to the table, even though I seem young. Not only have I done organizing in the state for over 10 years, but I'm actually a private and public sector strategy expert. I have advised executives on multi-billion-dollar projects. I have been doing this work for a very, very long time, and frankly, I would not be making some of the decisions that our current administration in Georgia has made in terms of, for example, the Pathways program. I don't think that we should be paying corporations more money than it would cost the government to do a program, for example. And so for a lot of voters who might look at a candidate like me and go, what in the world is going on? I tell them that, one, there's actually precedent for this. We've had 30-something-year-old governors that have actually put our state on a better path. For example,
I feel that the headscarf is an enforcement of patriarchy. I mean, the enforcement, maybe. But if she's choosing to wear it, then seems like not so much. Some people just choose to wear stuff like that, you know? Maybe it aligns with their religious beliefs, but she can wear whatever she wants on her head.
Governor Arnold retired our debt and really, really took us into a new era for Georgia in terms of expertise. Like I said, I love the state. I've lived in the state. I breathe the state. I mean, I could not wait to come back after I went to grad school. And so for voters who've never sort of heard of me before and might just only see a photo, there's actually a lot more here than meets the eye. And it's not even just because of me, it's because we've built a really great team over time that's really also dedicated to our state.
Representative, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And they've been doing just some incredible work going across the nation, doing little campaign stops, again, with people on the ground in all the corners of Georgia. Let me pull this up here. Here's an example from one of the most recent ones.
In case you don't know, we just flipped 2 Public Service Commission seats yesterday. On that same note, we thought, doesn't it make sense for us to immediately begin prepping for next year? Because what we have been saying since before we even launched this campaign is that Georgia has always been in play. Our state has one of the youngest populations in the country. We are a majority-minority state, and yet none of our statewide leadership has reflected that in any way, especially when it came to our socioeconomic status and the people who make this state what it is. For too long, we've been told the only way to win in a state like Georgia is a very, very specific playbook that rarely speaks to people that look like all of you in this room. And I mean that in every way. In order to win a state like Georgia, you need a multiracial, multi-generational, multi-faith coalition that goes and spans the entire 159 counties. And I don't know about you, but for far too long, too many campaigns have come in, dumped a bunch of money, gotten the results they wanted, and then left us. That doesn't make any sense to me, because we have seats up and down the ballot that impact people's daily lives. We have work that gets done during session that impacts people's daily lives. And so the more I spoke with people, the more I realized that nobody else in this race is even thinking about this. Nobody else in this race is even talking about building the kind of infrastructure that not only wins us the state one more time, but it actually flips who truly represents us and controls, by the way, every federal cent that comes to our state. And so we launched a campaign. We launched a movement for a Georgia that we can afford and one where we can all belong. And that was very intentional wording. Because again, they not only don't care about us being able to afford our own state, they also believe that none of us belong here. And I say us, again, very intentionally. That there needs to only be a specific kind of Georgian, even though many of us have been here for generations, many of us don't know any other home, and many of us recently got here, but are working really hard to make our state what it is. And the more we talk to voters, the more we realize that, hey, it turns out if you say the word affordability 6 times, things don't magically become affordable. You actually have to fight for some good policy. And what does good policy in a state like Georgia look like? It's raising the minimum wage. It's feeding hungry kids. It's reopening hospitals. It's investing in small businesses and taking homes back from corporations that keep making it harder and harder to actually live out what so many people have told us is the American dream, but too many of us continue to instead live a nightmare.
She's so good at this. If you live in Georgia, get involved with that campaign. Your homework is get involved with this campaign, do some door knocking, do some phone banking, go to some of the events, see what you can do. Okay? That's your job if you're in Georgia. That's one of the ways that you can get involved in this fight. Yes, Paladin, I think it's another good call, another good point here, especially given the breaking news in the middle of this segment. Folks, if any of you need help as a result of losing SNAP benefits, Due to how insane all of this is, there might be some people who live in states that had partial payouts or full payouts, but they didn't get it for some reason. It's all up in the air right now. But if you need help because you lost SNAP benefits, head over to the mutual aid part of our Discord and post the relevant info for how we can help. I know there are a lot of really good-hearted people in this community who want to be there for you and want to be here for you through these hard times, because our government might fail us, but we cannot fail each other. So we will all do our best to help one another through these difficult times. With that being said, vote Ruwa. I think she's great. I don't know much about the race. I don't know. I believe the election itself is in May of 2026, but a lot of work to do yet. A lot of work to do yet before the end of this campaign road. Here is the listening tour itinerary. Adorably, graphics like this keep getting posted on her campaign social media feed. So if anyone wants to go actually meet her at a campaign event, she's posting where she's going to be all the time. And perfect way to get more involved in politics. Very approachable candidate. Whew. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. Do the things that help the channel grow. And let's keep on going.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.